Views and opinions expressed in this episode of the Psychic Chat Show are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Gareth Lewis and the Psychic Chat Show podcast. Any content provided by our guests are of their opinion and not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organisation, company, individual, or anyone or anything. Welcome to the Psychic Show podcast with me, Gareth Lewis, and this week I have with me a good friend and colleague, Craig Morris. I've had the pleasure of touring and teaching with Craig over the last 3 or 4 years, and I know personally how passionate he is about his work. Today I will be asking him what it's like to be on tour and how it impacts on his personal life. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce this week's guest, international medium, Craig Morris. Welcome, Craig, and thank you for being part of today's Psychic Chat Show. How are you?
I'm all good. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be a part of it, and yeah, it's all good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Just keeping busy and doing these podcasts just to keep me off the streets, not get me in trouble.
Keep you busy, keep you out of trouble.
Trouble, Craig, keep me out of trouble. So, as I say, it's a great pleasure to have you with me today. And as I already introduced you, you're a friend of mine, and we've worked together many times. And just before we came on here today, we're having a laugh. So this podcast can go anywhere. We'll just see what happens.
We will.
But yeah, just before I start, mediumship and being a medium, I'm not going to say wasn't always your great ambition in life, but it's not what you set out to do from the beginning, is it? So where did you start your career from leaving school?
So leaving school, I went to college and I studied travel. So travel was where I went, just because it was interesting. And whilst I was at school, initially all I ever wanted to be was a police officer. That's all I ever wanted to do. And then whilst I was at well, many people can. I won't say what they say when they see me in it, but yes. Yeah, and so anyway, whilst I was going through school, that was when I became more interested in travel. And I mean, I'm a fanatic of aviation and aeroplanes, and I started going to day trips at the airport, etc. And that was when I gained a real love for flying and aviation. I thought, right, travel's the way I want to go. So I went to college, studied travel and tourism, did that, did an apprenticeship in travel. That was all good. Really enjoyed that as well. Got to travel to a couple of places in Europe as well. And then, I ended up flying as cabin crew for an airline that sadly, I can say it now actually, because they're not flying anymore, was Thomas Cook. And I had a wonderful few years flying for them out of Birmingham. And I thought, right, I'm getting there. I'm getting the exposure to the aviation. And it was at that point where I was going to start learning to fly. And as that started to happen, I was talking to training captains at the airline who were going to take me up, give me some hours flying, and take me down the lines of, what I needed. And then, well, the best way to put it is I started seeing dead people. So, and I always say to people whenever I'm out on the road, or if somebody asks me, if I ever did become a pilot and I was on the flight deck and I came onto the tannoy and said, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Just before we take off, can I speak to Mr. Smith in seat 11A, please? Because your mother-in-law is here to say hello to you." It probably wouldn't go down too well. And I have a joke and a laugh with that. But yeah, and then of course, as I say, that's where it went. But that was down to my granddad passing. That was, so that's where that started for me.
So before we actually get to how you actually got into it, and like you say, sadly your granddad he passed away, and we'll go on to that story shortly. But before we do that, was you always aware of spirits when you was a child? Was you always kind of like, or was it completely as when your granddad passed, that was the first experience?
It was only later on in life that I realised after my granddad passed and I had that experience, and then moving forward, that I then realised actually, I used to see my nan when I was a child, and she would, in a nutshell, it would be during the night. I'd go to the bathroom, and where that was located was pretty much opposite my brother's room. But as I was going in, I'd always look, and I'd see a lady stood next to my brother's bed, and my brother always used to see my nan anyway. Excuse me, when he was younger. And I thought nothing of it. I genuinely thought I was dreaming. Genuinely thought I was dreaming. And then, of course, now later on down the line, I realised that wasn't the case. So that was probably when I was about, I don't know what, say, it's got to have been when I was about 7 or 8 years old that it started. But nothing, apart from that, nothing else really happened. One or two bits did. I saw things. I said things that I didn't realise I was saying. And then, that lay dormant. I had my childhood just like everybody else did, and or most people did. And then we obviously get to the point where it really kicked off was with my granddad. So
Well,
yeah,
let's go on to onto it actually started. So your granddad passed the spirit world, and I know because I said I've known you for a while and what have you, and I know that I think you saw him at one point, or did you see him as well?
yeah,
So that
yeah.
was really your first kind of encounter, knowing that what you were seeing was real, what you were hearing or feeling was real, where before you never really acknowledged that when you was a child, it was just put down to dreaming or, wasn't really sure. And it all kind of made sense when you got
Mhm.
older and this experience happened. So what happened with your granddad's passing?
So I have to quickly tell this part because years ago, in 1986, when my nan died, his wife, I never met her. And my mom and dad, I think it was, had been to the hospital at Stafford, and they got back. And as they got to the door of the house, my uncle Kenny was at the door, and he opened it and he said, "We've got to go back. We've had a phone call." So my mom and dad never even got back through the door of the house. I think it was my mom and dad, definitely my mom. Never even got back through the door of the house. They got straight back in the car and they went. By the time they got there, she passed. Now, on the day of my granddad's passing, the 19th, Saturday, the 19th of September, 2009, my dad had already been first thing in the morning, 5 o'clock. Me and my mum were on the way, and we got to the top of the road. And I said to my mum, "Do you have the money for the parking?" She went, "No." So I did a U turn, went back. I said, "I'll turn the car around and I'll wait for you." She went to the door, she went to open it, and my dad had already seen us. And he opened the door. He said, "We've got to go." He said, "We've just had a phone call. Your dad's taken a turn for the worst." And it mimicked what happened with my nan and what happened with my granddad. So, and my auntie was there as well. So we all got in the car, we drove off. And I remember driving through Bloxwich High Street, and I looked at the time in the car, and it was 2:35. We got to the Manor Hospital, and I remember walking in. My auntie was on the phone, and I just remember my auntie Dewey. That was, she turned around, covered her face, just dropped down crying, and being told he'd already passed. So I just ran, got up there, and he'd already passed. As the time came up, we were sat there, and on the machine, we got told it was 10-3 that he passed, and that we just missed him. And the machine actually said 2:35. So I'm adamant it was 2:35 that he passed. When I looked at the clock, and I said, "You better wait." And I very much believe that was it, that he went.
So can I
The
just,
family, the rest.
Greg, sorry, can I just ask you on that? So none of you managed to be with him. He passed by
Yeah,
himself, and
yeah,
but it's as if kind of like you was being told maybe that he'd already passed,
yeah,
or he didn't want you there, or he didn't
very
want
much so. Yeah,
you think he kind of like, well, I don't want my because some people wait for family members to turn up, as we
yeah,
know when we're giving messages, and some people prefer to pass without leaving that grief behind, that seeing them pass. So do you think
yeah.
that was part of his idea? Was that kind of gentleman?
Yeah, I agree. I would say that definitely. He always turned around, even after he passed. He said, "Listen," he said, I don't want to be put on show. So when I've gone, once you've said your last goodbyes to me, wherever I am, that's it. I don't want you to bring me back out. I don't want to be put on show." So he didn't want to be put in the chapel of rest, and nobody got to see him. So anyway, I believe, yeah, very much so, that could have been a thought. I mean, looking back now, yeah, it could have been a thought by saying, "Listen, I'm off. I'm not waiting for you," because I don't want you here. So I believe that he knew that my dad would have been there with him first thing in the morning. He got to see all of his family before he passed, and he hung on and hung on because my one auntie and uncle were away on a cruise, and they got back, and within a few days he passed. So I knew that he was, because he kept on saying, "Where's our Kenny? Where's our Kenny?" My uncle that was away, and we kept on saying, "He's on his way. He's on his way." And we had to say that to him for a few days. But do you know what? He hung on until he got to say goodbye to all of his kids and and some of his grandchildren. But yeah, so I believe that. But when we all got eventually, when we were all in the room together, he just looked as though he was asleep. And anyway, as we sat there, I was sat next to him, and I was sat in a chair, and I got my face in my hands like this, and I was naturally, I was emotional, I was upset, and I remember speaking to one of my friends, but at that, as I was sat there like that next to him, the room just went blissfully quiet, just went quiet, and then the only way I can describe it is literally seeing a light, just a light that came. It sort of, as I'm sitting here in the corner of the room, this light, and all of a sudden I just heard a faint whistle. Now my granddad had no teeth, and he whistled, but it was like that. Literally, there was nothing else. And I just looked, and I knew straight away who it was. Knew, and as I looked up, I saw my nan and my granddad, and it was almost the only way I can describe it. It was like I felt the words that my nan said. Well, first of all, my granddad turned around and said, "What are you all crying for? I'm okay. I'm all right." Look, I mean, he was separated from his wife for 23 years, so he was happy to be back with her, and my nan. And it was this feeling from my nan saying, "It's my turn to look after him now." And at that, they just went, and that was it. So that was the first for me. That was probably the first real experience, and I'm explaining it now because I've probably talked about it quite a lot. However, at that moment, I suppose I questioned, am I really seeing that? Is that just in my mind? Am I going a bit mental? Is it just me? But I look back now more and more and more, I think, no, that happened. That happened.
That is kind of like well, as we know, it is extraordinary. But if nothing else, Craig, even if it didn't take you onto the road that you're on now, what a wonderful kind of like memory, and what a wonderful feeling, and a wonderful experience to have had anyway.
Absolutely.
Whether it took you onto this road or not, you've got that feeling. You just knew, however you picked it up at the time, that your nan and your granddad were together, and she was looking after him. So that's a wonderful experience by itself. So from there, I kind of feel then you went on to look into mediumship. You went on to what took you into your first spiritualist church, seeing your first medium, the beginning of your journey, and how did that kind of develop from there?
So our next door neighbour, Alvin, she knew my granddad, and as I was talking to her, she said to me, she goes, "Why don't you go and see a medium?" And in complete honesty, I didn't really know what a medium was at the time. And anyway, so she told me to go and see this lady called Lorraine up in Hensford. So I booked in on a Friday afternoon, and as I was on the way up there, I stopped off at the cemetery first, and as I parked up, I went to my nan and granddad's grave, and I said, "Right, listen, you know where I'm going to go, you know where I'm going to be. Make sure you come through and you say hello. Just let me know that you're together." Even though I already knew from that experience at the hospital, excuse me, some months before, I just, I, it was the validate. I think it's just a human factor in us, the human side to us. We just want that validation. So I stood at the grave and I said, "Right, come on, you know where I'm going to be. Just come through and let me know you're okay. Let me know you're together." So I left, and just as I was leaving, for anybody that may watch this, if you go to Great Worley Cemetery, that is actually in Chesley and Hay, as I was about to leave and get back in the car, there's a really, really old gravestone. I need to really get the picture of that, to be honest, because I need to share that if I can anyway. But of a lady called Edna Amy who died in 1923. She was 19 years old. And I just stood there and I looked around, because you think to yourself, if I'm going to stand here at a grave talking out loud, I'm going to look a bit soft. But I stood there, there was nobody around, and I just said, right, okay, if this is real, if there really is an afterlife, you'll come through to me today and just say hello. That's all. Just say hello. Tell me who you are and just say hello. Got in the car, drove up to Lorraine's, got there. And we sat there. Lorraine said to me, she goes, right, I'm aware of your nan and your granddad. I was like, okay, yeah, let's, pretty much prove it as such. And she goes, but just before I start, she said, I need to acknowledge another lady. She goes, she's just stepped in. She's told me to say her name's Edna, and she's literally just here, waved hello, and then gone again.
Wow.
I was like, okay, you've got me. And that was it. And then from there, everything else that she said was spot on. So that was my first sort of experience there. And then it was there that she'd said to me, you want to be doing this? I said, I'd love to. But I only wanted to do it to communicate with my granddad, nothing else. I didn't want it like how the level that we're at now, that we go out and we're on the road and we're teaching and all of that. Wasn't interested. I didn't know that existed, in complete honesty. Didn't know. And I just wanted to talk to my granddad. And it was from that point, I was so impatient. I went back 4 months later because nothing had happened, and I was so impatient. And when I went back for the second time, at this point, I was meant to be moving to London to my friend Simon, and I got a job and everything. That was all sorted. And as I was there for the second time, Lorraine said to me, she goes, "I keep seeing London." And she said, she actually brought up about a move. I said, "Well, yeah, it's happening." And she said, "But whereabouts?" I said, "Harlow." And she went, "Yeah, but whereabouts is it?" I said, "It's 7 miles from Stansted Airport." And she went, "Craig, have you ever been to Stansted?" I went, "No." She goes, "Do you not know what's there?" I was like, "No." She goes, "So you wouldn't have heard of the Arthur Findlay College then, would you?" I was like, "No." She said, "Trust me." She goes, "You're going to go on this journey." And anyway, she goes, "Look it up." So I looked up the college, and I signed up for their newsletter. Anyway, the move to London fell through within a couple of weeks of that visit to her, to Lorraine. And I thought, oh, blimey. So what's happening now then? Where am I going with this? What's happening? Again, being so impatient. And at that, I got a newsletter come through from the college, and it said, "We've just opened up our brand new Arthur Findlay Centre at Stafford, Stafford Spiritualist Church, which is 15, 20 minutes from where I was living." I was like, okay. So I made an appointment. I went along, sat down with a lovely lady, Christine Thompson, and and I met Julia Ormond at the same time, and they just said, "Yeah, it sounds like as though there's something there." Anyway, a course was coming up with a tutor from the college, and I did the course and I made my first link. Yeah, so that was when my first experience and how it happened came about.
And from there, you started to study and learn and experience and gain that knowledge of being a medium. We're sitting with some fantastic mediums. I know you sat with one medium in particular, Tim Abbott, who we've got on
Yeah,
the
well, I actually, it was, I must say, it was Jeanette. It was Jeanette's, his wife. It was her circle that I got invited into. But I did often sit. Tim would join us if he wasn't working away. He would sit with us as well. But majority of the time it was with Jeanette. But I always say Tim and Jeanette. I had the pleasure of sitting with. I mean, I still, every now and again, I still speak to them now. But they played a huge part in my development. Huge part, yeah.
Tim on the podcast.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant.
I might just tune into that because he is, as you know, Craig, he is a knowledgeable person.
Very
When it
much
comes
so.
to mediumship, spiritualism, and we're talking about altered states of consciousness with him. So have a pop along and have a listen to that as well.
I will. Yeah, that'd be good.
As we move on there, so that took you on that journey, and then we're going to go into the touring part as well now, because I know at one point you've worked with some amazing mediums, including me. But I know you was lucky enough to join Colin Fry's tour at one point, and I know this was sadly the late Colin Fry towards the end of his life, but still to have that opportunity. How did that come about, and how did you then find not only being on tour, but being on such a massive tour, from going from 30, 50 people, let's say, in a church, to now 200-300-1,000 people in an auditorium. How did that transition? So let's start off with Colin Fry. So how did you actually meet the late Colin Fry?
Well, the first time I met him, I was working in a call centre, and me and two friends, we went to Sarah and Jane, the three of us. We finished work early. We drove into Birmingham, and we went to go and see him at the Alexandra Theatre. And it was the first time I'd ever met him. And anyway, I had the opportunity of talking to him on the night by asking a question in the theatre. But then at the end of the night, when he did his book signing and everything, got my book signed and everything, had my photo taken. And that was it. And we just, from there, anytime he was in town, I'd always go and watch him. Sometimes me and Mum would go and watch him. And I remember there was one night I'd gone to Wolverhampton to see him work, and I was with a friend of mine called Anne, and then two of Anne's friends, and we sat there, and he came out in the second half, and I just, I just taken a mouthful of chocolates, and anyway, he said, right, who's got a question? So I was almost done, and I just put my hand up. And I said to him about asking a question, and he just looked and he went, Craig, how did I know you were going to ask me a question? See, this was the thing. I always took the opportunity, whilst I was in the company of somebody like that, I always took the opportunity to ask a question, about development. So it wasn't about, how do you know a loved one's nearby? It was about developing and what he could share. At that point, I mean, in this audience, there was 700 or 800 people. So he said, Craig, stand up. He said, now everybody. He said, I've had messages from people when I'm up and down the country asking if I can do private readings. It's not possible. He said, but this guy is local. He said, I know that he's good. He said, so my advice is go and speak to him. I'm sure he's got some business cards on him. Speak to him and he'll give you a card. So I'm there and I'm choking on these sweets that I'm trying to remain, composed, if you like. And I'm there coughing away. And he just said, right, so Craig, this is everybody, this is Craig, etc. And that was that. And he said, right, Craig, you have a question. And that was it. I was like, huh. And then, so that was that. And that's just how it was. We just got on well and all of this. And then it was Monday, the 10th of November, 2014. I'd resigned from my job at the time. And I remember emailing my manager and I said, here's my resignation. She said, not a problem. I will terminate your contract by the end of the day. Fabulous, no problem. So I flew up to Scotland, flew to Glasgow, and he was doing an event, a dem with Derek Okora. And there was 2,000 people in the audience that night, roughly speaking, at the pavilion. And so I watched them. And at the end, lots of people queuing up for photos, book signings, and I'm just stood there and I'm on the phone and everything. And at one point, he leans over to Derek and he said, "You see that young lad over there?" And he went, "Yeah." He said, "Watch out for him in the future. He's up and coming." So, and my idea was, once everybody got their book signed and everything, I'd have a quick chat with them, and then I'd go to the pub, have a few beers, and that'd be it. Fly back home the day after. Well, they were staying in the same hotel where I was, so I got invited back for a drink. And we were up a little bit late, and had we mixed with one or two different sort of spirits, I'm sure you can imagine. And as soon as we sat down, Colin said to me, he goes, "Did you enjoy the show?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's fabulous. First time I've seen you work together, so yeah, really good." He said, "Good, I'm glad to hear it." He said, "Now, how would you feel about joining me on my tour next year as a guest medium?" So I'm sat there, and literally my jaw just hit the ground. I'm just like, "This is crazy." And I said, "What?" He said, "You won't know this," he said, "but I've had people out watching you." He said, "So I'm, basically," he said, I'm impressed with what I've heard." He said, "So I just think it's about time that somebody gave you a break, gave you an opportunity." So, and this for me was just amazing because, they say one door closes and another one opens. I just resigned from my job full time. And to go full time as a medium, not really knowing where it was going to take me, to have this opportunity literally put out in front of me on the same day, and that was it. So that's where the opportunity started, and it was a couple of nights or 3 days later, I got to go to see them again on their last date together, and I just got the exposure of it. Then I did the mic running and things like that for them, any little odd jobs they needed, and then it was in a few weeks, maybe a couple of weeks after that, I did my first event with him at the Lyceum Theatre in Crewe. Beautiful theatre, and I remember stood on that stage looking at it thinking, actually, this isn't too bad, this doesn't look that big, until there was over 600 people sat out there. Then it becomes a big room. So yeah, that's how that came about.
Yeah. I mean, what an opportunity to have anyway. And I know, I know from talking to you, that Colin, I didn't know him personally, but I know he took people and he spoke to people. He spent the time. He wasn't just a
Yes,
celebrity medium. He wasn't a television medium, and he actually took the time to, engage with
yeah,
people.
absolutely.
And to be able to do that with you, and then to give the opportunity what it's given you. So that then took you out, and you started to do your own churches and put your own tour together. What is it like now? I mean, what, you're about 10, 11 years into it now, from
Mhm.
first starting. And so what's it like now to look at your diary on the 1st of January and think, wow, when am I at home?
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, after Colin passed, it was a real sense, a real feeling that, right, I'm in this. I'm on, I'm in this now on my own. I haven't. There's nobody else that I can not necessarily fall back on. But of course, when I was working with Colin, there was plans to put, because he had a couple of other people, and with him, and one of them I was going to go on to work with, which was Bex, and I've had the pleasure of working with Bex several times, but a wonderful medium as well, I must add. But it felt at that point where I was literally on my own. It's like, right, where am I going to go with this? And at that point, I just thought, I suppose I've just got to take what I can. I thought, do I go back to work? It's like, no, don't do that. It was the feelings that I kept on getting. And I was just serving spiritualist churches and centres. I ended up working for a paranormal team. And I was doing private reading. So literally, I was burning the candle at both ends. But of course, at the time, I had to make a living. And I mean, this from the early days. You have to take what you can get. It's just like any self-employed person. We have to live. We've got to still keep a roof over our head. We've got to put food on the table, and all of that costs money, even to get to these places. So initially, it was quite stressful. But as it's gone on, of course, naturally the names got out there, and I've had the pleasure of working with some of the wonderful mediums, Billy Cook, one of them, Gordon Smith. I know that I work with you as well, but Gordon and Billy have
I
given
was
me
thinking about an afterthought then, wasn't
not at all. Well, you'd already mentioned you, ain't you?
I?
So, but with Billy and with Gordon, they again have given me opportunities, and of course, close friends of Collins as well. But yeah, they've helped along the way, and it's, I suppose, one thing I've learned with doing this as well is that you have to look out for each other as well. You've got my name up there into your area, and like I've got your name down here. You help each other out and do that. So it's good when you find people that that you can work with and you can trust with this. But I look in the diary now and I think I'm lucky. I know you have to put the time and the effort into it, and you have to put the work into it. And I call it the apprenticeship. And I certainly feel as though that, where I talk about stressing myself out in the early days, for me, that was the apprenticeship. Because you do an apprenticeship these days in whatever industry it may be in, you don't earn a lot, but you get by, you do okay, and you get the exposure, you get the experience. And for me, that's what I was getting, and it was great. So I look back now, and I remember when I first went full time, the spirit world said to me, because I said to him, right, I'll do it then. I'll go with it and we'll give it a go. And all I got back was, yes, it's going to take you 5 years before you actually earn any money as such. Because some people, as some people think, you go to these wonderful theatres, you've got a couple of hundred people sat in front of you and you've earned a ton. But actually, they don't realise how much it costs to hire them theatres. We've got hotels we've got to stay in. We've got the fuel to pay for. We've got the promotional materials to pay for. The fees, that aren't included at the theatre as well, that we have to pay for. And so it's behind the scenes that people don't always see everything. But For me, I wouldn't change it either. That's the thing. But anyway, so for me, as I look at the diary now, I've done that apprenticeship, and I think, do you know what, that 5 year mark that they set and they gave to me was spot on, because it was at the 5 years that it was really starting. Work was, coming in left, right, and centre. I know it was nice. It was a comfortable amount, again, to the point where I was burning the candle at both ends. So I do, like you just said, I look at the diary and I think, when am I going to be at home? Although I think Wayne quite likes that, when I'm away for so long.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
to the family and the partner and whatever else in a minute. I know you've got a supportive partner there with Wayne.
mm.
But we've been out many times on the road, and we have a laugh,
Yeah,
and we've had a few tales. Uh,
just a few.
I know. Once we did a demonstration, and someone thought it was a drag queen. What was all that about?
And for anybody that's watching and listening to this, it wasn't me that they thought was a drag queen.
It was.
It was
I mean, we've had a few laughs, and
yeah,
we've enjoyed it. And one of the best things I think, we have our own tours, but
yeah,
half a dozen or so, 10 times a year, we try and get together and put something together. And what I find is, when you're out on the road with someone, not necessarily got the support of someone on stage,
mhm,
but you've also got the company of someone
yeah,
traveling to that event, and you've got the company of someone at the event, and you've got the company of someone as you go for a drink afterwards. Not that me and
mhm.
you go for a drink afterwards, it's more time, bedtime, and that's it. Separate rooms, obviously. But that's another story.
Yeah.
So do you find, I'm not saying you find one better than the other, but do you find working with someone like that a bit of a break from being out away from home by yourself?
Yeah. It's one thing that, I mean, I've had conversations with you on this. I've had conversation with Bex, Billy. Lots of mediums with this, and Tony as well. We talked about this, and I remember having these conversations and thinking, do you know what, they're absolutely right. That even though, okay, yeah, granted, you go along, you might go and do a weekend at a spiritualist church or centre, and you're working on your own, which is great. But when you get to work with somebody especially you can call a mate, it makes it a little bit, it makes it more fun, because like you say, sometimes you might be on the road and you might be you might be a bit under the weather, we say. So you think, I haven't got to worry too much, because I know that I'm working with yourself, for example. So that's okay. But majority I mean, the touring life can be a lonely one, because you can drive up one day or two of the days, I might stop off in the Midlands, and I've got a few days of readings there, and I'm seeing family and friends. But then, right, I'm off now. I'm carrying on further up country, or I'm going across country, wherever I'm going. And sometimes, because of where I live here in Devon, it's not that often that I can go do the event and then come back again. And because usually you're booking 3-4 events in a row to go and do them all together. So when you get to work with somebody, it just takes away the boredom when you're in the, I mean, I love driving, because I don't just sing in the car, I perform. But when I'm with Billy, we're having a laugh, we're having a joke, and before you know it, the time's up, we're here. And it's the same with you and I mean, blimey, a couple of years ago, about this time 2 years ago almost, we were driving up to Scotland. That was what, a 3 hour drive. You imagine doing that on your own. You did a 3 hour drive. We drove up there. We did the event, and you imagine just doing that and then going back to the hotel room, and then going to your next event, back to your hotel room, and next event back to your hotel room, and then home again. You imagine doing all of that on your own all the time. It can be pretty lonely,
Well, it's
pretty
something I
lonely.
don't realise as well, and this is no disrespect to people, but when they want to be a medium, like you mentioned, touched on before, they don't realise actually what goes into it.
Mm,
People think, oh, you must be wealthy, oh, because like you said, you've got outgoings out of
yeah,
that. Have the people
yeah,
paying £10 a head? It costs X amount of thousands of pounds to set up. Um, and they don't take into consideration as well how much time you are by yourself.
Yeah.
away from your family. And I mean, I know from years ago when I first started doing touring and I had to stop for my own personal life and started again. And I remember doing it probably on the level that you're doing it now. I don't do it as much because I'm old. I still tour, but I try if I can to get back home. Well,
Yeah.
I'm more luckier because I'm more central England, where
Yeah.
the network's a lot easier for me to get by on. But and I used to sit there sometimes in London or wherever I was, and you just think, what am I doing?
Mm.
People don't realize that they've gone back to their families after watching you work and they're now
Yeah. Yeah.
in bed. Sometimes they're in bed and you're still on the motorway driving home, 2 hours later after the show's over with.
Hmm.
So that is what people don't take into consideration as well. I mean, you say about having a laugh and having a bit of fun, and I know when we're together, one of the best times, apart from the drink afterwards, for me, is that 5 minutes before we go on stage, and we're in
Hmm.
the dressing room, and you put your music on, you
Yeah.
know, or getting our suits on, or getting changed, whatever. The music goes on, and then the dancing starts.
Oh
And,
yes.
even when we're stood in the wings and we kind of and the way I look at it, I was talking to someone the other day about it. The way I look at it, Craig, is I don't know about you, but to me, when I've got you at the other side of the stage and you're in one wing and I'm in another, and we're looking at each other and we're messing about, that to me is getting rid of the nerves
Yeah. Yeah.
and starting the enjoyment. But when you haven't got that person there and you're by yourself,
Mm.
again,
Absolutely.
that loneliness. So going, you mentioned Wayne, your partner there before. You've been with him a few years now, and he's supported you. Do you have a supportive family? I know you have a supportive family around you, but do you have a fully supportive family around you where, not just in your mediumship, but in life in general? Are they there for you? Because that's so important when we do our job to have, a network around us of friends and family. Do you have that? Do you
Yeah.
feel you have that support? Or do you feel sometimes you're letting your family down by being away so much?
No, I very much supportive. Like you say, first of all, I mean Wayne. I've been with Wayne. It'll be 3.5 years now, so it'll be 4 years in August. And there's times where when we first met, he knew what I did. He knew what I mean, yeah, he knew what I did, and he would never. He'd never sort of sit there and demoralize it. He would never say, "Oh, what a load of old codswallop" or anything like that. He would be just like, well, okay, that's cool. If that's your thing, that's your thing. It wasn't his thing as such. Although when I was going out on the road, if I was going up, there was one trip we did. I was doing a demonstration in Southampton on the Friday, and I don't know if there was something else as well, but we drove up there. I said, well, why don't we just make a weekend of it? And he said, yeah, all right, then fair enough. So we drove up to Southampton. We booked into a hotel, and I did the demonstration, finished the demonstration, and then there was a good bar that we liked, just not far from the hotel, and we went there. So there are times where I'll go away and he'll come along with me, and sometimes we're moving on to somewhere else afterwards. But if he's off for a weekend, he's got nothing planned, then he'll tag along. But so very supportive in that sense. Again, when I'm in the Midlands, I remember the very very first theatre I ever did on my own. My mum and dad were there. They come to support me. And again, when I first started doing this, I remember my mum saying to me, she goes, I just don't want you to bring this home. Don't, no private readings or anything like that. I said, no, that's fine. I'll go to people's houses. And very quickly, she changed her mindset, because she was listening to me talk. And sometimes I'll be at home, little things would just drop out, when I become aware of my nan and my granddad. And the same with my dad. My dad, if it's your thing, great. If it's not, it's not. But I remember one point I was at home in the Midlands, and there was one point where I was in that point where I thought, what am I doing? I managed it before where I had a job that I enjoyed and felt that I was good at, and also I was still able to serve my churches and things like that and do a few readings. So maybe just go back to doing that. And I remember my dad saying to me, I mean, my mom said no straight away. My dad just said, no, you've worked too hard. You've got people. This was after Colin passed. He said, look who you've just finished touring with. you've worked hard for this, so don't give it up. And anyway, so I didn't. So, and even my brother and sister-in-law, they're great. They're brilliant. They'll always be supportive. And the friends that I've got as well, Simon. And yeah, so I am lucky, very lucky.
That's good. Like I say, you've got to have that supporting network
Mm,
around you, you know. So do you, I mean, I know how difficult it is. It's like now you'll now be booking for 2 years' time. So next year's
mm,
probably booked, and then you're booking for the year, but you don't know what's going to happen next
no,
year. So do you not feel bad sometimes that, let's say, you booked a weekend doing your workshop and your readings and demonstration, and people bought tickets already and it's already sold, but
mhm,
then there's a family gathering and you can't make that family gathering because work's coming, do you
yeah,
know? And so sometimes when family gatherings come in and everybody's got to work and things happen, but you can sometimes turn around to your boss and say, can I have next weekend off? Or,
yeah,
oh, later on this year and book time off. But because you're booking so far in advance, do you not
yeah.
feel guilty sometimes or bad sometimes that you have to choose that from that when you don't really have a choice to turn around when you know boss to ask, and
Mm.
everything's already set up and it's sold out or whatever.
Yeah, naturally you feel bad. I mean, and there's been times where I've been away and there's been a gathering that's been, because of course, up there in the Midlands with my family and my friends, they can say, oh, listen, Moz, we're going to do this or we're going to do that, or um, I and they'll plan it for say a month or 2 months time. They might say, "Oh, listen, we're going to get together on such and such his birthday. We're going to do this. We're going to do that," and you think, "I really want to go because everybody will be together." It's all we're in the summer months now, and you look and you think, "But I can't." There was one instance, and it was when we were meant to be booked. We were booked for Hackney Quid. We'd done the first year, and we'd already booked in the second year. And if you remember, the majority of the people that had already booked with us on the first course booked and paid for the second course already. So we'd got pretty much all of them students, I think 85, 90%, if not more of the students that had already re-signed up. And then all of a sudden, my mate contacted me and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm getting married. Here's the invite." And it was on the day of on the weekend of our weekend at Hackney Coed. And I said to him, "Mate, I'm really sorry, I can't come." And he said, "Why?" He said, "This is like a year away." I said, "I know it is." I said, "But I'm booked." He
Mm.
said, "Can't you change it?" I said, "No." So I've got a course in Wales, and the trouble was that if we'd only got a couple of students, maybe, but then again, if we'd have just booked it and there was nobody booked on it at that point, then I would have called you and said, "Listen, can we look at changing it?" Spoke to the venue before anybody books on it. But when you've already got people like our students that have booked onto it, and they've paid for their places and everything, you do feel bad, but at the same time, not only do we have to not only do we have to earn a living in life, but we've also got to remember that these students have already dedicated themselves to that time, and we need to as well. So
Yes,
it,
they
it
they took time off work, haven't they? They booked holidays off work.
yeah, exactly. So
Before I go on to, because I know you do teaching as well, but we're going to start coming up to the end of it. I know time's it goes so fast. But I just
I
wanted
know,
to
yeah.
ask you a quick thing as well. Apart from missing family when you're on the road and you're on tour, what else do you miss? Apart from missing your friends and your family, is there anything else that you miss? You think, oh, I wish I were at home.
If I'm away for a weekend and it's nice weather, and because usually in the summer months, the brighter months, I mean, as you know, you and Kelly have stayed with us down here. We've got some phenomenal places where we can go and walk along the beach and then go and sit at the bar and just look out for hours. There are times when I'm away and I think, "Do you know what, I could just go and sit there," knowing that Wayne might be out with our friends over a weekend, thinking, "God, I wish that was me." Um, and I think the one thing that I'd miss the most is probably my home comforts, like being able to sleep in my own bed. It's little things like that, that you don't have to worry about, and so it's just little things like that, I think,
So,
and also home cooking as well.
Yeah.
Home cooking.
There's always so many McDonald's you could eat on the road.
Exactly.
So yeah, you talked very quickly there about your teaching. So I know you do teaching as well. We both do courses together and individually. But one thing I want to ask you about teaching, and you've done it for so many years now. Can anybody be a medium? Can you teach someone to be a medium?
My first answer is going to be no. What I think you can do, everybody has an awareness, everybody has intuition, everybody has a gut instinct, a sixth sense. Everybody has those abilities if they choose to nourish them and work on them and develop them. Everybody has that ability. But at the same time, I think everybody can be aware of the spirit world, but I don't think anybody could be a medium, because it takes a certain person to be a medium, because depending where, what level we're at, but not everybody's comfortable stood up in front of a platform of people. Not everybody's comfortable stood up talking and demonstrating and not going in with a script, because when we do this, we don't know what we're going to get. We don't know who's going to come through. Not everybody could work away from home, and not everybody wants to dedicate time, money, energy into what it is that we do. So the honest answer is I don't think anybody could be a medium, no, but I think everybody has the ability to be aware of the spirit world.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with that. So Craig, one thing before we do finish up here today is, I'm asking everybody, what would you say is your best experience? And maybe you've already answered that, and if you have, that's fine. But then again, I'm asking, what is your worst experience? What would you say is your worst experience of being a medium, and what's your best?
Oh, blimey. My worst experience, you probably know what I'm going to say, actually. We did a demonstration together, and it wasn't working with you. It was when we turned up at the venue, and one of the people that worked at the venue, we were getting ready and we were setting the stage up and setting the microphone, lighting, all that sort of thing up. And all she kept on banging on about was that she didn't believe in this. She thought it was a load of old rubbish, and that all these people that would come to see us was a waste of money. I really wanted to say to her, will you just go away? You're not helping us psych up for the night. and then on the night as well, we were giving out the evidence. The first part was like, but I'm going to nick Billy's saying on this. Sometimes, most of the time when we're doing this, it's like touching heaven. Sometimes, just a few times when we do this, it's like pulling teeth. And for me, that night was like pulling teeth because they just weren't with us. They just weren't working with us. So it's hard work. And in the end, I just said, do you know what, ladies and gents, if you ain't going to talk to me, there's no point me stood up here wasting my time. So do you know what? I unplugged my microphone and I sat down and said, Gareth, they're all yours.
I just tell everybody there who's listening and watching this, she was like a right diva. The microphone went flying. She flinched off, sat at the back and left me to it. But when I got up, I told them off. And that woman right at the beginning, she was. And I remember turning around to Craig, and I remember turning and going, well, we need you, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
We don't want to hear you. If you don't believe it, go away. She was one of the six there. I remember that. So what's your best experience? What's the one where you turn around and go, do you know what? This is why I do this.
Oh, you've answered me you've asked a question for my best experience of why I do this. So now I've got a different answer, because I've got an amazing experience that I would have said, but I had a phone call the other night from I've mentioned Bex actually today, and she messaged me. She goes, have you got 5 minutes? I was like, yeah, sure. So I spoke to her, a quick FaceTime, and she said, I've got to tell you this. She said, I've had like a group session tonight. She goes, one of the ladies that was in there, I think it was like a meditation group or something like that. Anyway, she said, and this lady mentioned Billy Cook and Craig Smith is what she said. And she said, I had to start laughing. She goes, do you mean Craig Morris? She goes, oh yeah, that's the bloke. And she said, right. She goes, well, I've got to tell, Bex is saying this to the woman. She goes, Bex, I've got to tell you this. Let's just say her name was Mary. She goes, Mary, Craig's a good friend of mine. I've known him for quite a few years and we've worked together quite a number of times. She goes, the words she used was amazing. She goes, I had a reading from him, and she goes, at the end, just before we finished, she goes, the last thing that, let's say, her mom said, you're going to get a phone call Wednesday night. you know, don't ignore it. Take the phone call. And like you'll know, we give messages day in and day out. We can't remember all the messages that we give, so I couldn't remember this. And anyway, so she's telling Bex this. Yeah, he told me this message, and she goes, Wednesday night the phone rang. It was late at night. She goes, we answered it. She goes, and it was my husband's son. She goes, and he was ready to take his own life. She goes, he was ready to kill himself. And she said, because she goes, if I didn't answer that phone like Craig said, which actually was her mom, not me, then that boy would have been dead. We wouldn't have seen him again. She goes, but because I took that phone call, as Craig suggested, and told and said to, because the spirit world said, he was saved. Yeah. And I just thought, and all of a sudden, just now, even as I say it, I can feel almost like a lump in the back of my throat, because I think we don't always realise how empowering this can be, and the responsibility that we have as mediums, and that you think you don't realise every day. I'm sitting in this moment now thinking, okay, her words to Bex was, he saved that lad's life. Wednesday night, he saved his life. And I don't view it that way, like you probably wouldn't. I just viewed it. I listened to the spirit world. I passed on that message, doing my job. I was doing what I'm here to do. And you know what? If it saved that boy's life and that he was able to see his dad and family the day after, then that's the reason why I do this.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like, just if you just do one thing out of every reading, what means something to that sitter, just say one thing, then you've done your job.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful, and it just makes what we do worthwhile. Takes all the trolls and all the insults we get and everything else, just puts that to bed and thinks, well, that's why I'm doing it. So just before we finish, Craig, if you can just tell people where they can find you if they want to book you for a reading, want to come and see you demonstrate as well, or even come and see both of us demonstrate on our tour. Which we're on. But where can they get in contact with you? Where can they find you? And how can they book you?
So they can go to Facebook first of all, and there's a public page, Craig Morris Psychic Medium, so you can get me on there. Instagram, you can get me on there, Craig_Morris_Psychic. But the best place to go is always going to be my website. All the W's, Craig-Morris.co.uk. The contact us page for private readings, and the events page for demonstrations. There's a workshops events page as well, so you can go on there. And on the homepage, if you sign up to my newsletter, I send that out monthly, and that lets you know what I'm going to be doing, who I'm working with, and where I'm going to be.
Brilliant. So if you want to have a reading of Craig, or you want to book him for one of your events, just head over to his website. As I said, it's probably the best place to contact him. Drop him a line there, and I'm sure he'll get back to you. Craig, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Chats are very good to this, because I've known you for so many years, and but
I think I've been well behaved as well, actually.
I think we got it all right just before we actually started recording.
Yeah, he gave me a warning before we came on. Everybody said, don't mess around, don't do this, don't do that. So I think I've been quite good. But no, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. So thank you for having me.
As I said, everybody go and see Craig work wherever he is in the country. He's all over the country, and even into Europe as well. We've not even touched on some subjects, mainly teaching. Also, you've got a book coming out later on in the year.
The book's happening. The book's coming out really soon.
I'll put the details out on where you can find that as and when they come through as well. But Craig, for now, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. And thanks for coming on.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you very much.